Hello everyone, my name is Jinks'd and I would like to thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Full Writes Again, the podcast where I discuss how I view the world as a writer, along with how I find inspiration and gather writing prompts for my everyday life and travels. For those of you who aspire to be writers, and for those of you who are very avid readers and are curious where their favorite authors get inspiration from, this is the podcast for you, because I plan to go over topics such as plotting, world building, character creation, and even character motivation. Hope you all enjoy it. With that being said, let's get the show on the road. Following the theme from the last episode, I have a couple scenarios for you. Imagine that you are wandering through a city, brand new place, you've never been there before. It's quite large, very metropolis type area. When suddenly you get to the center of the city and you see a giant pile of dirt. Doesn't match anything around it, and you're very confused about what it is. So you search it and you circle around trying to determine what it is. When you get about halfway around it, you start to see what appear to be stone blocks sticking out of it. You walk a little bit farther and realize they're not blocks, they're some buildings, and then you get even farther and realize it's actually a pyramid. And you ask yourself, why is this in the middle of a city? As for a second scenario, for the next scenario, imagine that you've been in the same city and you don't want to be in the city because you're tired of buildings and the metropolis. So you, being very adventurous and curious, decide to explore out into the region. Outside of it is a jungle, so you cut through it, and as you're going through it, adventuring, using your machete to cut away vines and all that, you discover even more abandoned buildings and structures. No roofs on any of them, no doors anymore, just mainly walls and dirt floors, completely overcome with vines. And you think to yourself, what are these ruins? And since I'm being generous, I'll give you a third scenario. Imagine starting in the same metropolis and no longer interested in the jungle, you decide you're going to travel even farther out of it. You go farther around, get enough miles out of the town, and you're settling in a desert. Now, you're very curious about the desert because you grew up in a region that had a lot of deserts, and you know that sandboarding is a thing, along with dune buggies and all this. So you find a little company there that allows you to rent a dune buggy, and they will also take you out to the middle of the dunes to go sandboarding. But along your long ride out into the dunes, you see even more ruins. Curious about it, you ask, what are those? And surprisingly enough, your tour guide tells you it's an old set of ruins where priests lived and sacrifices happened. It's another possibility you can encounter. All very different. Now you may be asking yourself, what do all these stories have in common, besides the fact that they are all ruins? And the answer to that is, this actually happened to me on my trip across Peru. While they didn't all start in the same city, they were all things I actually did see. When I first got to Lima, I was getting ready to start my backpacking trip and join my tour group. Since I got there a day early, I ended up wandering around the town. Lima's a very large city. There's about 12 million people that live there. It's actually the largest city in Peru. It is very much a metropolis. If you've been to a big city with skyscrapers, you've basically been to Lima. I'm wandering around the town, and I actually did get to the center of it, and there was a set of ruins there. Very old, wasn't part of my tour, did not expect it to happen because it was just I'm in a neighborhood, and next thing I know, there is a giant pile of dirt and half uncovered ruins. So, me being me, I joined a tour group to see what that was all about, and it turns out that it belonged to a civilization that predated the Incas by lots of time. And if I'm not mistaken, they'd only discovered the ruins about 20 or so years ago, and they don't suspect that it's going to be uncovered completely for another 20 years. As the tour guide was saying, the ruins themselves were 20 or so years ago. They were being used for motocross. All sorts of dirt bikes and ATVs crawling across it because they didn't know what it was. And then suddenly, someone managed to find a brick in there, and they started uncovering it and bringing the archaeologists out, and it turns out it was a pyramid. And a pyramid that had lots of mummies found in the top of it. Imagine that. You were suddenly doing motocross over a gravesite. Kind of a creepy thought. I kind of exaggerated on the second scenario. One of the major sites in Peru, if you weren't aware, is Machu Picchu, an old Inca site, and there are also lots of Inca sites spread across the country. And it's basically what happened with that is we had archaeologists and explorers searching through the jungles, and then they suddenly came across ancient cities, whether it was Machu Picchu or any of the other ones that were there. Some of them were discovered by forest fires, burning away all the shrubbery and trees. Others were intentionally found by explorers. Some weren't actually discovered intentionally, and they were looking for other places when locals told them about the ruins near them. So you can encounter lots of ruins in Peru. It's quite fantastic and fascinating. I encourage visiting if you ever get the chance. But that played into the second scenario. You really can just go into a jungle and potentially find ruins and have no idea why they're there or who they belong to. My third scenario also happened. After spending a couple days in Lima, I ended up taking a bus to Nazca, where I did go with a tour to go sandboarding the dunes. We took a dune buggy out into the desert and viewed lots of things along the way. There were aqueducts, and there were cacti and other plants and farms and a couple cemeteries, and along the way we stopped at more ruins. It was another type of pyramid that just had buildings and structures but no walls and no doors. You can kind of see where stairwells were. More fascination. From what they were telling me, priests lived there. And I can't recall right now if it was one of the ones that predated the Inca. I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But that was another amusing thing to me, is that there were so many ruins throughout Peru, and they didn't all belong to each other. They didn't belong to the same civilization. They were a conglomerate of every civilization. Again, you may be thinking to yourself, why am I spending so much time talking about these different sets of ruins? And the answer to that is, it's world building. I went to Peru, no idea what to find, and I came back with so much inspiration. Last episode, I talked about plots I can get from Peru. This episode, it's world building. And I don't know how much joy you get out of world building, but I thoroughly like it. It's one of my favorite things to do. And yes, I know a lot of my world building will never be discussed with others, and it's just for my amusement alone. One day it might come out in a story or a novel or even a poem, but that's far down the line. For now, I just like to take ideas and somehow incorporate them into my world. Initially, I created one little city, and that was where all my stories were taking place. I was doing world building for it, and I created a city based on a real life city in the mountains. It didn't have much depth besides a couple places here and there, maybe a major corporation, a company here and there, a hardware store that everyone attended and went to, maybe a small coffee shop, an amphitheater, but it didn't have too much personality. After going to Peru, I realized there's so much more I could actually include in my world. For instance, there's nothing wrong with having a set of ruins in the middle of the town. I can just throw that in there and let it be a job. It allows me to throw archaeologists in there, and there's a reason for them being there because ruins were discovered. It can give some history for it because my ruins were ancient and no one knows how old they've been. I can play around with the idea that there's another set of ruins a couple miles away, or 26, and you have to hike to that set to get there. Going a little bit deeper, I don't have to have my ruins be from the same civilization. They can be different. One can be older than the other. They could be warring factions. Someone built it on one mountaintop and another built their ruins on another mountaintop, and they essentially were outposts. It adds to my world. It adds character into it. And I like that aspect. It gives depth to my world. I can play around with the timeline there too. For instance, if I was to create a story set 20 years earlier, or even 30 years earlier, I could have just a giant pile of dirt that's being used for motocross. And then advance 15 years into the future, and it's somewhat uncovered, and people are trying to take claim to it, and they don't really know what it is. Advance another 10 years, and they know exactly who it belongs to. It's claimed. You have organizations like UNESCO who have potentially made it a sacred site, so people can't just randomly dig it up. Or you can play around with it where it now has created a giant legal battle between a homeowner who owned, say, 10 acres of land in the middle of the city that they found ancient ruins on, and now the government who wants to control this sacred site. who actually owns it. While I may never actually write anything about that, I can include it in county records. In another story, I can have a character search through the library trying to find actual plots of the city, what the initial design was, and civil engineering, and then come across these records. While it's not plot worthy, it's just extra detail that gives the city life. In my world, while I haven't committed to throwing such ruins in the middle of my city, I have committed to having ruins outside the city now. It just seems interesting that way. And the more I'm taking from Peru, the more I'm realizing that my city is less and less like its initial inspiration. Cities grow. Go to any of the towns you've been in. If you look at it 20 years ago compared to now, it has probably expanded so much that you barely recognize it. The same thing can happen with your world building in whatever story you're writing. When you first wrote about your town, is it anywhere near the same as what it is now? Probably not, because you've now added a whole lot more. You've added extra buildings, you've added extra companies, you've added streets and names and everything. It has grown with you, whether it was initially, for number's sake, 100 residents and it was enough to fit 100 residents. Now it's expanded to 1,000 residents, or it's up to 5,000. It just keeps growing, because that is how world building works. It keeps growing. There's no reason to stop and hesitate on what's going to be found, because now you're hindering progress, and any inspiration like that is important to at least consider. I do want to add that I am not trying to replicate Peru. There are aspects of the country and the culture and everything that I like, but it doesn't completely fit into my world. Yes, I will throw ruins here and there. I'll have some older than others, because that was a concept I had never considered before. I assumed every set of ruins in a location would belong to the same civilization. No, I've now added that aspect into my place. And since my initial city took place in the mountains, I'll probably include a lot of the highland aspects of Peru. But I have no desire to write a desert into my place. Maybe one day I'll expand my world to be more than just a little region. Maybe I'll have multiple countries that I've created, and a character will travel to a desert thousands of miles away. I haven't got that far yet. I don't want to do that large of a scale of a world. I want to stick with my local scale and then let it gradually expand over time. But I have fun thinking about it. I hope you all do too. And it really is important for stories is to have some aspect of world building. I know some individuals like to write very urban fantasy and they will completely replicate a story, and sometimes it's important and sometimes it's irrelevant. In nonfiction, you really need your story and your facts straight. In urban fantasy, you need your story, you need your world. Does that have to be 100%? No, because there is still a fantasy aspect in there. And if you're replicating a city, be careful with the facts. Otherwise, you may get called out for being inaccurate. Now, if you create your own city, that is not as likely to happen because there's no one to correct you unless you blatantly misunderstand what your city is like. If you tell them that there's an ocean in the middle of your city in one book, and then you tell them in the next one that there is a mountain, you may be called out. Now, before I wrap this up, I have another prompt for you. How did you discover the giant pyramid that was buried in the middle of your city? Was it always there? Was it a couple of kids playing? Who owns it? The government? Is it part of an ancient civilization that surrounds your country? If not, is it from a warring faction? So many possibilities. And I hope you have fun with it. You can add it as part of a plot, or you can even just have it as world building. All you have to do is use it and think about it. It could just be inspiration for something else. But now I really do have to say goodbye to all you lovely listeners out there. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And if you know any writer friends, please send them my way. I'd love to have them here. And please be on the lookout for the next episode, where I talk about character creation and Peru. Thank you all again, and have a good day.